Welcome back to Decouple Studios. I'm Jesse Freeston, and today we're talking about replacing those fossil fuels that represent 80% of the world's energy use today. We're talking about oil, we're talking about coal, and we're talking about methane gas. What we eventually decide to replace all that energy with will have massive implications. But one thing that's happened is that the enthusiasm to replace it with wind and solar energy has outpaced the research needed to find out exactly what that transition would mean for the Earth. Specifically, what type of mining would be involved in that. Enter the Geological Survey of Finland with a groundbreaking new study, the most comprehensive yet, on exactly what the mining impacts would be. And I gotta say that from the perspective of our favorite planet, the results are grotesquely inconceivable. Inconceivably grotesque? No, grotesquely inconceivable. First, to set this scene a little bit, decarbonization is going to require epic amounts of clean electricity, not just to replace all the coal and gas-fired power plants powering the world today, but also we're going to need to even double the global electricity production in order to replace all the other things fossil fuels do for us, like transportation. Should we decide to do that primarily through wind and solar, according to this report, we are talking about 2.1 million new wind turbines and 27.6 billion new solar panels with a B. Now, what the hell is that going to mean for our favorite planet? Well, to pick just one metal caught up in all this, copper. All this would mean an additional 4.5 billion tons of copper would need to be mined. That is 6 times more copper than has been mined in the history of our planet. In fact, if we redirected all of today's current copper mining production towards this energy transition, it would take us 190 years in order to mine the copper needed for all those wind turbines. Except even if we had 190 years, we still wouldn't know yet where to find all that copper. Because 4.5 billion tons is 5 times more than all the proven copper reserves on Earth right now. Reserves here meaning copper that we know where it is, but hasn't been dug up yet. And now strap in for a very depressing festival of ands. And the model that the Finns are using here actually also includes a doubling of global nuclear electricity, as well as a doubling of hydroelectricity and a tripling of geothermal electricity. If solar and wind were to go about this all on their own, these numbers would be even worse. And these numbers don't include the millions of miles of new transmission lines that will be needed to connect all these far-flung power stations. And this is the worst and of them all. These numbers are only for the first generation of wind turbines and solar panels. You see, wind turbines only last about 20 years, and solar panels, well, they can live to about 30. In theory, some of the metals will then be able to be recycled, and there's quite a bit of debate around how much and which ones, but basically you're looking at around 30% of the materials might be able to be recycled. For the rest of all those materials, there's no plan in place. It's just gonna sit there and leak out heavy metals. This is a good moment for an important point. The calculations in this report assume that the global energy consumption will be the same 50 years from now as it is today. And I can feel some people breathing a sigh of relief saying, oh great, we just have to reduce our consumption, maybe do a little degrowth. Just keep in mind that even if we in the energy wealthy countries were to drastically reduce our consumption, those gains would be easily erased by extending just some basic energy access to the rest of the people on the planet. For example, the 800 million people who still don't have access to any electricity at all. And continuing to keep these people down is not a climate solution that I want any part of personally. So now that we've briefly opened and then quickly shut that little window of hope, let's get back to the depressing stuff. You see, the real challenge of a wind and solar heavy energy system is that they only produce energy when the wind is blowing and the sun is shining, which is roughly a quarter, or if you're lucky, a third of the time. Today, most grids cover for this intermittency by burning methane gas. But in the zero carbon world, that work would have to be done by energy storage. And in this study, the Finns decide on batteries as the most likely source of that storage. Well, the largest such battery that humanity has managed to build to date is at a place called Moss Landing in California. It's pretty big, but in order to back up the global grid, we're gonna need the equivalent of 4 million Moss landings. And the first Moss landing isn't doing so well.
Fire at a PG&E Tesla-powered energy storage facility in Moss Landing. Fire led to a shelter-in-place order and forced the closure of Highway 1.
But, all right, if that's what we got to do, then let's get to work. 4 million galacto batteries. Let's get at it. Well, among quite a few critical metals, that would require 944 million tons of lithium. God damn, there's a lot of numbers in this episode. 944 million tons of lithium, that's 50 times the known lithium reserves on Earth today. The good news, I guess, on that front is that there's way more lithium. It's pretty abundant in the Earth's crust. We just haven't found it yet. But current lithium mining is already sparking lots of local resistance. And that is at a relatively very low rate of production. In fact, if we just continued mining lithium at our current rate, it would take 9,920 years to mine the lithium needed for the batteries to back up the global grid based on wind and solar. And remember, that's, again, just for the first round of batteries. Basically, even if we did decide that we wanted to pump out millions of wind turbines and billions of solar panels and stadium-size batteries, it's not even clear we could. On top of the copper and lithium challenges I already laid out, there's a whole bunch of other metals in here too. Nickel. We would need 940 million tons of nickel as well. That's 10 times more than the current known reserves of nickel. And 218 million tons of cobalt, 27 times the known reserves of cobalt. These are just a few of the many critical metals that would have to be found, extracted, crushed, and transformed before 2050. And then 20, 30 years later again, found and extracted and crushed and transformed again. Often the image we have of the renewable revolution is of happy people installing solar panels on a sunny day on a rooftop or something. But the true image is more like thousands of mega machines lined up to the horizon, crushing rock and turning the Earth's crust inside out at a rate never seen before. This explains why many mining conferences and trade magazines are predicting the greatest decades in the history of the industry to come. And if we didn't have an alternative for decarbonizing our electricity, then this video would basically end there. Depressing as all hell. But we do. It's called nuclear energy. And while it would require a lot of mining still to replace all that fossil fuel energy, it'll require a lot less than wind, solar, and batteries. That's because of something called energy density, which I get into during my tour of the world's largest nuclear plant, which you can check out right here. And here's where you can click to subscribe to make sure you get more Decouple Studios videos like this in the future. Because yeah, we got some work to do.